everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. So
Yeah.
today we're going to take a look at something I know a lot of you have been wanting to know more about,
Okay.
which is the family life of Confucius.
hmm
And they really go into the social context of his time,
Okay.
which I think will really help us understand all this.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
hmm
even with all this research, scholars have done a lot of work on this.
Right.
There's not a lot of information out there about his wife and son.
Yeah.
It's sort of a historical mystery.
Really is.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yes.
But what we do have is really interesting because some of it kind of goes against what people commonly think about Confucius.
Right.
So that's what we're going to look at today.
Okay.
So most people know about Confucius the philosopher, but not a lot is known about his personal life,
Right.
especially his wife. It's like history just decided to focus on his teachings and his travels, and his family kind of got left out.
Yes. It's very strange, isn't it?
It is. It's so weird.
We have these detailed accounts of every conversation he seems to have had with rulers and disciples.
Right.
And then when it comes to the wife,
Nothing. Crickets.
yeah, it's so strange.
Yeah.
It goes into some of the claims that are out there. And what's amazing is that we can learn a lot by what's not said.
Yes.
Confucian Analects of Confucius from the Three Kingdoms period.
Okay.
And they say that Confucius's wife was from this noble family named Guan in the state of Song.
Okay.
Sounds plausible at first glance.
It does. Yes.
But when you look at it,
Mm-hmm.
and you dig a little deeper into the social customs of the time,
Right.
during the spring and autumn period, when Confucius lived, that claim starts to fall apart a little bit.
Sure.
Because back then, imagine the society where marrying someone with the same last name as you, even if you weren't closely related, was like a huge no-no.
Think of it like instead of just avoiding marrying your immediate family, you had to consider your entire extended clan,
Wow.
going back like generations.
Okay.
And this was called
Right.
no marriage between people of the same surname.
I see.
It was like one of the most important parts of their social structure.
Okay. Interesting.
So even if you weren't really that closely related,
Mm-hmm.
just having that same ancestral surname was a total deal breaker.
Wow.
So that's where the Analects claimed it doesn't really make sense
Yeah.
because Confucius and the nobility of the state of Song
Huh?
share the same ancestral surname,
They did.
Z.
Z.
So you'd have been like a major social taboo for them to intermarry.
I see.
So it's like trying to solve a riddle where the answer just doesn't fit the rules of the game.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, this is when Confucius is like in his early 20s.
Okay.
He's just starting out as a low-ranking official.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the famous sage that he becomes later on.
Right.
So it's unlikely that he would have like the social status to marry into a noble family
I see.
from another state,
Okay.
especially with these really strict marriage customs.
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, that account in the Analects is kind of questionable.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
So if she wasn't from this noble family, then who was she?
Right.
Maybe the lack of information itself is a clue.
Oh, that's interesting.
So think about it.
Mhm.
If Confucius's wife was from a prominent family,
Okay.
wouldn't there be some record of her lineage?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the fact that there's silence surrounding her suggests she was probably from a more ordinary background,
Right.
maybe even connected to his mother's side of the family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So perhaps someone from the Yan village area
Exactly.
where his mother was from?
Yeah, someone whose family history wasn't considered important enough to actually write down.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think about the social dynamics of that time. It was way more common to marry within your social circle,
Uh-huh.
especially through like family connections,
Right.
than to try to find like a high status match from outside your community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a good reminder that even someone like Confucius,
Mm,
who we sort of think of as almost this like mythical figure,
right.
was still a product of his time.
Absolutely.
Like he was living within the same social structures as everyone else.
Right. And that brings us to another really interesting part of Confucius's family life, which is his son, Kong Li.
Conglì.
You might be familiar with the literary allusion Tao Pei Li Dui,
Oh, right.
which refers to this carp that was given to Confucius.
Right. Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, so the story goes that the Duke of the state of Loom gave Confucius a carp as a gift.
To celebrate Congli's birth.
Exactly, to celebrate his son's birth.
Okay.
But I have a feeling the story might have some layers to it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Just like the account of his wife.
I bet.
You're picking up on something really important here. Remember at the time of Kong Li's birth,
Mm-hmm.
Confucius was just a junior clerk in the Joseon family.
Okay.
So like a low-ranking official.
Right.
So we have to remember his social standing when we're thinking about these historical stories.
Right. And speaking of social standing, there's also that story of Yang Hu,
Yes.
who was another clerk, and he openly questioned Confucius's abilities.
He did.
So this makes it seem like Confucius wasn't super respected by everyone at that time,
Yeah.
especially not to the point where the Duke would send him like a personal gift.
Right. It seems a little unlikely, doesn't it? So it's
Yeah.
much more believable
Yeah.
that this carp was a gift from the head of the Joseon family,
Yeah.
Confucius's employer.
Right.
Maybe just like a gesture of goodwill to someone who works for them.
Okay.
And then as Confucius becomes more famous over time,
Right.
the story might have been embellished
I see.
to kind of elevate his status.
Right. To make him seem more important.
Exactly. And to imply a closer relationship with the Duke than there actually was.
Okay, so it's like historical telephone,
Yes.
where the story changes a little bit each time it's told.
Precisely, but that doesn't mean the story has no meaning.
Right.
The carp, even if it wasn't from the Duke,
Mm,
still has this symbolic weight.
okay,
It shows how important gift-giving was in ancient Chinese society.
right.
Even seemingly simple gestures carried a lot of social and political meaning.
Okay.
And then there's how Confucius chose to name his son.
Right, he named him Li.
Yes, after the carp.
So at first glance, it seems like a simple detail.
Yeah.
Even kind of quirky,
Mm-hmm.
but I bet there's more to it.
Oh, there's always more to uncover.
Okay, tell me.
Naming his son after the carp, regardless of where it really came from,
Mm-hmm.
was likely a really smart move on Confucius's part.
You mean like a way of showing respect to his superiors in the Jisun family?
Exactly, like saying, hey, I appreciate this gesture, I'm loyal to you.
Right.
And that kind of thing would have been really valuable for someone like Confucius,
Yeah.
who was navigating this complex social hierarchy.
And trying to climb the ladder.
So it's like a subtle form of social strategy,
Exactly.
hidden in a simple act of naming his son.
That's right. It's amazing how these little details
Right.
can tell us so much about power and ambition in that time.
Yeah. It really is fascinating.
It is.
Makes you think.
It does.
What else is hidden in history?
Yeah, what other stories are waiting to be told?
Exactly, and maybe we'll find some of those.
Maybe we'll.
How complex history really is.
Hmm.
I mean, we think about these figures from the past, and it's easy to think of them as almost mythical,
Right.
but they were real people, making decisions within these really specific social structures.
Yeah.
And even something like naming a child could have these ripple effects that we might not even think about. Absolutely, and that's why I think this deep dive into Confucius's family life is so fascinating.
Yeah.
It gives us this much deeper understanding of the man behind the philosophy.
Right.
It's like we're peeling back layers of time to see him not just as the sage,
Right.
but as a husband, a father, a member of a community,
Right.
dealing with all these social complexities that everyone else was facing.
And it makes you wonder what other choices in his life might have been influenced by those social dynamics.
That's a great question. It really is, and it takes us back to Confucius's pragmatism,
All right.
which seems to have been like a defining trait for him.
Right.
Even in his early years. I mean, think about it. The spring and autumn period,
Mm-hmm.
that was a time of huge upheaval and political intrigue.
Yeah, not exactly a peaceful time.
No, not at all. And for someone like Confucius, who
Yeah.
was born into this declining noble family,
Right.
social mobility wouldn't have been just a personal goal.
Right.
It would have been vital for survival.
So making a good impression on powerful people would have been super important.
Yes. Even through these small gestures.
It makes the mystery around his wife even more intriguing.
Yes, it does.
If she was from a more humble background.
Mm-hmm. Which seems to be the case.
Like the evidence suggests then, her life and her experiences
Right.
might not have been considered worth recording by the historians at the time.
That's a really good point.
It's a reminder that history is often told from the perspective of the elite.
It really is.
We don't often get to hear the stories of everyday people,
Mm-hmm.
especially women, in these ancient accounts.
Right. Their voices are often lost.
Yeah, it's like they just disappear.
And that's why it's so important to examine those silences in the historical record,
Yeah,
to look for those missing voices and try to piece together their stories.
it's like being a detective,
Yeah.
but for history.
Absolutely searching for clues to bring those forgotten lives into focus.
And maybe those gaps in the historical record, those silences,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're the most interesting parts of the puzzle.
In a way, they are, because they force us to ask questions, to dig deeper,
Yeah.
to consider perspectives that might have been overlooked.
So what does all this mean for someone listening today?
Right. What's the takeaway?
Why should these details about Confucius's family life matter to us centuries later?
I think it comes down to this by understanding the social context
Nope.
of his time and the complexities of his personal life.
Mm-hmm.
We get a much richer understanding of his philosophy.
Yeah, it's like we can see his teachings not just as these abstract ideas,
Right.
but as the product of a real person
Absolutely.
who is dealing with the same challenges and aspirations as
Mhm.
people throughout history.
Exactly. It humanizes him
It does.
in a way that just reading his philosophical texts might not.
Yeah, you see him not just as this wise sage,
Right.
but as a husband, as a father, as a part of his community,
Mhm.
trying to make his way in the world.
Yeah. And by seeing that,
Yeah.
by recognizing his humanity,
Mm-hmm.
we can approach his teachings with this whole new perspective. We can appreciate not just his words, but the life experiences that shaped them.
Right. It's like realizing that even the greatest thinkers
Yes.
are influenced by the world around them.
Absolutely, by their relationships, their struggles, even the smallest decisions.
And by understanding that context,
Right.
we can understand his ideas better.
Right, because in a way, history is a mirror.
It is.
It reflects not just the past, but also who we are.
Okay, so thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be back soon to explore another fascinating corner of history.
Looking forward to it.
See you then.